Welcome to today's lecture. And today's lecture topic is the brachial plexus, an important and repeated asked question in university examination. Uh, can be asked even in Viva, MCQ, short notes, and essay. There are possibilities, many topic hidden in the brachial plexus. And this lecture we are going to see what is brachial plexus and easiest and the finest definition of the diagrammatic view of brachial plexus. Let's get into the topic. As I said it before in the video, this anatomy is derived mostly in the Latin and Greek word. This brachial plexus is derived in the Latin word that is plexus brachialis. That is the Latin word. So what is meant by brachial plexus? Brachial means a upper limb. Is a upper arm. And the plexus is nothing but a group or branches of nerves. The branches of nerves is called plexus. So brachial plexus, it's going to arise from the spinal cord. It's arising from the spinal cord. Let's see anatomically how it formed the brachial plexus. It is formed by the anterior rami. Remember that formed by the anterior rami of a four lower cervical that is C5 to C8, C6, C7, C8 nerve and the first thoracic nerve that is T1. It is formed by the anterior rami of lower four cervical nerve that is C5, C6, C7, C8 and the first thoracic nerve that is T1. We have seen the formation of brachial plexus and where it extends. This plexus extends from the spinal cord through the cervico-axillary canal. This is another important MCQ or a Viva where this plexus is extended. This plexus extends from the spinal cord through the cervical axillary canal that is present in the neck and via the first rib, that is over the first rib and into the armpit. This plexus extends from the spinal cord and through the cervico-axillary canal in the neck and over the first rib and into the armpit. And each vertebral level, the spinal nerves arise and leaves the spinal cord via the intervertebral foraminae. The another MCQ is to be asked as where at each vertebral level the spinal nerves arise and leaves from dash, that is called intervertebral foraminae of the vertebral column. We have seen the brachial plexus that arise from the spinal cord and it is formed by the anterior rami of a lower four cervical nerve that is C5, C6, C7, C8 and the first thoracic nerve that is T1. And the plexus is extended from the spinal cord through the cervico-axillary canal in the neck. That is a cervico-axillary canal in the neck and over the first rib and into the armpit. And the another one important thing to keep in mind in the brachial plexus is at each vertebral level. So I repeat it, at each vertebral level, okay, the paired spinal nerves that arise and leaves the spinal cord via the intervertebral foraminae of the vertebral column. The another one important that C5 to C8, that lower four cervical nerve root is there, right? That goes above the associated vertebrae. For example, we have C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. In this, the C5 cervical nerve is arrived above from the C6 vertebrae as well as the C6 is arrived from the above the C7 vertebrae as well as the C7 root that above the C8 vertebrae and the C8 nerve that arise above the T1 vertebrae and below the C8 vertebrae. That is why the C5 to C8 root goes above the associated vertebrae. So the C5 now arises from above the C6, and the C6 arise above the C7, and the C7 arise above the C8, and the C8 arise above the T1 and below the C8 vertebrae. Okay, now we have seen the formation and each and everything. And what is the function of this brachial plexus? As I said, it contains the branches of nerves. So it's going to supply the nerve supply of arm, that is motor and sensory innervation to the upper limb. Keep it in mind, it's going to sensor the motor and sensory innervation to the upper limb. Now see the diagrammatic view of a brachial plexus. This is the easiest and simplest way to remind the brachial plexus, roots, nerves, and the trunks, cords, and branches. The brachial plexus is formed by the roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and branches. It is formed by roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and finally branches. There's a mnemonic to keep it in mind. To continue in this order, we can take the first letters. There's a R in the root, and the T in the trunks, and D in the divisions, cord in C and B. So we can keep a mnemonic. Remember to drink a cold beer, so that we can, without change, we can donate this order. There is the roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and branches. As all we know, this brachial plexus is formed by lower four cervical nerves and the first thoracic nerve, that is T1, C5 to C8 and T1. Now listen carefully. This C5 and C6 is combined to form the upper trunk. The C7 alone is going to form the middle trunk. And then again the C8 and T1 spinal nerve get united to form the lower trunk. Okay, the C5 and C6 spinal nerves get united to form the upper trunk. The C7 alone it forms the middle trunk, and C8 and T1 get united to form the lower trunk. We have seen the roots, that is C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1, and the trunks. Combination of C5 and C6 form the upper trunk, and C7 alone it forms the middle trunk, and C8 and T1 united to form the lower trunk. Now we have seen roots, trunks. The next one is division. This each trunk is going to give a two division, that is ventral and dorsal, is also known as anterior and posterior. And the same way the middle trunk is also going to give a two division, that is anterior and posterior. Okay, this upper trunk is going to give anterior and posterior division, and the middle trunk is also going to give anterior and posterior division. Then this lower trunk is also going to give a two divisions, and this only this lower trunk we are going to locate this as anterior and this as posterior. Okay, got it? The upper trunk is going to give a two divisions, anterior, posterior, also known as a ventral and dorsal, and the middle trunk anterior and posterior, as well as the lower trunk and anterior and posterior. We have got roots, trunks, and we get into divisions also. The next one is cords. We have seen the divisions. Next we are going to see the cords. This posterior division of the upper trunk, watch carefully, this posterior division of the upper trunk, okay, and the posterior division of the middle trunk and the posterior division of the lower trunk, that united to form a cord, that is a posterior cord. Carefully listen. The posterior division of the upper trunk and posterior division of the middle trunk and posterior division of the lower trunk, all the posterior divisions of the trunks united to form a posterior cord, and the anterior division of the upper trunk and the anterior division of the middle trunk, okay, this united to form a lateral cord. The anterior division of the upper trunk and the anterior division of the middle trunk is going to form the lateral cord. Then what is left here? This anterior division of the lower trunk is going to form a medial cord. See, all the three posterior divisions of upper trunk, middle trunk, lower trunk is going to form a posterior cord. The left is anterior division of the upper trunk, anterior division of the middle trunk is going to form the lateral cord. So what is left out? The anterior division of the lower trunk, that is going to form the medial cord. Okay, we have seen the roots, trunks, division and cords. Let's go into quick revise. C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. This C5 and C6 spinal nerves united to form the upper trunk. C7 alone is going to form a middle trunk. And then again the C8 and the T1 spinal nerve united to form the lower trunk. Okay, we have seen the upper trunk, middle trunk and lower trunk. Each trunk is going to give two divisions, that is anterior and posterior. We have anterior division and posterior division in the upper trunk, same as well as both in the medial and lower trunks. We have anterior, posterior, anterior and posterior. Next to that, this division is going to give us a cord. This posterior division of the upper trunk, posterior division of the middle trunk, posterior division of the lower trunk is get united to form a cord that is called posterior cord. Why? Because we are saying the posterior. Here we are going to have an axillary artery, that is deeper. This posterior we have an axillary artery. According to that, this cord is divided into lateral, medial and posterior. This axillary artery, that is lateral cord, is called a lateral cord, which is present medially is called a medial cord, and which is deeper is called a posterior cord, that is next to the axillary artery. Then this each cord is going to give a branches. In lateral cord we have a three branches, that is one is a lateral pectoral nerve, that is lateral pectoral nerve. The next important muscle is musculocutaneous nerve. Another one is a lateral root of median nerve. Keep it in mind, lateral root of median nerve. We have three branches in lateral cord, that is lateral pectoral nerve, musculocutaneous nerve and lateral root of median. This posterior cord is going to give a 5 branches. To remind this 5 branches of posterior cord, we can keep a simple mnemonic as ulnar. U-L-N-A-R. This ulnar, the first one is upper subscapular nerve. That is upper subscapular nerve. Obviously, the L stands for lower subscapular nerve. And this N stands for nerve to latissimus dorsi. Next, the A stands for axillary nerve. And the R stands for radial nerve. So this posterior cord is going to give 5 branches. One is upper subscapular nerve, lower subscapular nerve, lateral latissimus dorsi, axillary nerve and radial nerve. Again, this medial cord is going to give 5 branches. We can remind this as 4MU. We can remind this mnemonic 4MU. The first nerve branches is medial pectoral nerve. Then another one is medial cutaneous nerve of arm. The same, the medial cutaneous nerve of forearm is going to supply medial pectoral nerve, medial cutaneous nerve of arm, medial cutaneous nerve of forearm, and the another one is median root of median nerve. And then the lateral cord is again going to get united with the medial cord. It is going to give a ulnar nerve. We have 5 branches for medial cord: medial pectoral nerve, medial cutaneous nerve of arm, medial cutaneous nerve of forearm, median root of median nerve and ulnar nerve. So easily for lateral cord we have lateral pectoral nerve, lateral root of median nerve. as well as in the medial cord we have medial pectoral nerve, medial root of median nerve. The another one is in lateral cord is musculocutaneous nerve. So again, medial cord we have medial cutaneous nerve of arm, medial cutaneous nerve of forearm, and ulnar nerve. Next, in posterior cord we have a 5 branches, that is upper subscapular nerve, lower subscapular nerve, nerve to latissimus dorsi, axillary nerve, and radial nerve. We can remind this as ulnar. ULNAR, upper subscapular, lower subscapular, nerve to latissimus dorsi, axillary nerve, and radial nerve. Another one nerve that is running from the C8 and is going to till C7 and giving a subsidial branch, and another it going to C6 and also giving a subsidial branch, and it's written the C5. This is called a long thoracic nerve. It's arrived from CT, it's going upward till C7 and giving another subside branch, and then it's rising to C6 and it's giving a subsidal branch to, and then it's rising to the C5. This called okay. Now we'll start the diagram of brachial plexus. As we all know that the lower four cervical nerve, that is C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1 is going to form a brachial plexus. In this, the C5 and C6 are united to form a upper trunk. Is going to form upper trunk, and then the C7 alone it's going to form middle trunk. And then again the C8 and T1 is combined to form a lower trunk. We have seen the roots and trunks. What are the roots? C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. The C5 and C6 united to form upper trunk. C7 alone it's form a middle trunk. C8 and T1 united to form a lower trunk. Now this each trunk is going to give a two divisions. Anterior and posterior division, or ventral or dorsal. Same wise, the middle trunk is going to give anterior and posterior division. This lower trunk is going to give anterior and posterior divisions. Now this division getting united to form a cord. Now the anterior division of the upper trunk and the anterior division of the middle trunk is united to form a lateral cord. Is getting united to form a lateral cord, and then the posterior division of the upper trunk and the posterior division of the lower trunk is all get united to form a posterior cord. All the three posterior division is getting united to form a posterior cord. The posterior division of the upper trunk, posterior division of the middle trunk, and the posterior division of the lower trunk is getting united to form a posterior cord. And then this anterior division of the lower trunk alone is going to form a medial cord. So anterior division of the upper trunk and the anterior division of the middle trunk is going to form a lateral cord, and then the posterior division of the upper trunk, posterior division of the middle trunk, posterior division of the lower trunk is united to form a posterior cord, and then the anterior division of the lower trunk is going to form a lateral cord. Now we are going to see the branches. We have seen the roots, trunks, divisions, cords. And before getting to the branches of each cord, we have a nerve that is starting from here, C8, it's going around the TC7 and giving a subsidal branch over here, and then it's going around the C6, and also in the C at the level of C6 it's giving another subside branch and it's reaching the C5 level. This is called a long thoracic nerve. This is called a long thoracic nerve, and this is going to supply the muscle called serratus anterior. The any injury that happens in the long thoracic nerve will leads to winging of scapula, which means the scapula it is in the bird's wing. It is in the shape of bird's wing shape. Next, at the level of C5 root, we have another nerve that is called a dorsal scapular nerve. This is going to supply the rhomboides muscles and the elevator scapulae. And then at the level of upper trunk, we have another nerve emerging here. This is called a suprascapular nerve. Is called a suprascapular nerve that is going to supply a supraspinatus and infraspinatus. That infraspinatus is going to help in the lateral rotation of spine. Next, we have another nerve. This is called a nerve to subclavian. This is going to supply the muscles of subclavius. It's going to develop the clavicle. It's going to supply the subclavius muscle. That is known as nerve to subclavian. Nerve to subclavian. Okay. Then in lateral cord, we have three branches, that is a lateral pectoral nerve and musculocutaneous nerve and lateral root of median. And here we have now this is called a lateral pectoral nerve. This is called a lateral pectoral nerve, and this is going to supply the pectoralis major muscle. And then this is called a musculocutaneous nerve. This is called musculocutaneous nerve. And this musculocutaneous nerve, the sensory root is going to supply the lateral side of the forearm, and then the motor group is going to supply the coxobrachialis, abrachialis and brachioradialis. So then this lateral root is going to come down over here and down over here, and it's going to end over here. This is called a medial pectoral nerve. This is called a medial pectoral nerve. Okay, in this lateral cord we have seen the three nerves: lateral pectoral nerve, lateral root of median nerve and the musculocutaneous nerve. Next, coming to the posterior cord, we have a 5 branches, that is ulnar. We are going to see the upper subscapular nerve. This is upper subscapular nerve. This upper subscapular nerve is going to supply the subscapularis muscle, which is helping in the medial rotation of scapula. Then we have lower subscapular muscle, lower subscapular nerve. This is going to supply the subscapularis along with the teres major. And then we have another nerve, that is a nerve to latissimus dorsi or a thoracodorsal nerve. This muscle is called nerve to latissimus dorsi. As the name indicates, is going to supply the latissimus dorsi muscle. There is going to be extension and the lateral rotation of shoulder joint. Then we have an axillary nerve. The axillary nerve is going to supply the deltoid and teres minor. And then this is axillary nerve, and here it is a radial nerve. This radial nerve is going to supply the triceps muscle. Okay. In posterior cord we have 5 branches. One is upper subscapular, a lower subscapular nerve to latissimus dorsi, axillary nerve, and radial nerve. We have seen the 5 branches in the posterior cord. Okay, then the medial cord is again going to give a 5 branches. Is getting united to form a median nerve. This is called a median nerve. And then here we have another branch. This is called a median nerve. And then we have another branch in the medial cord, that is here, that is medial cutaneous nerve of arm. And next to that we have another nerve that is called a medial cutaneous nerve of forearm. And then next to that we have another nerve that is called ulnar nerve. Called ulnar nerve. Okay, we have seen all the branches. Now we'll go to the quick revise. This C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1 are the roots. The C5 and C6 again combining to form upper trunk. C7 alone is going to form a middle trunk. C8 and T1 united to form a lower trunk. So each trunk have two divisions. Upper trunk is going to divide it into anterior and posterior. Middle trunk is going to anterior posterior. Lower trunk is going to divide into anterior and posterior. The upper trunk anterior division and the middle trunk anterior division is going to form a lateral cord. Then the upper trunk of the posterior division and the middle trunk posterior division and the lower trunk posterior division is united to form a posterior cord. Then anterior division of the lower trunk alone is going to form a medial cord. Okay, we have seen roots, trunks, divisions, cords. Now we are going to see the branches of nerves, and before that we have another nerve that is over here. This is called a long thoracic nerve that is going to supply the serratus anterior muscle. And then at the level of here we have a dorsal scapular nerve. This is going to supply the rhomboid and elevator scapulae. At the level of trunk we have a suprascapular nerve. This is going to supply the supraspinatus and infraspinatus. And at the level of the trunks we have a nerve to subclavian. It's going to supply the muscles of subclavius. And then in lateral cord we have 3 branches. This is called a lateral pectoral nerve. This lateral pectoral nerve is going to supply the pectoralis major. And then we have a muscular cutaneous nerve over here. The muscular cutaneous nerve or sensory branches is going to supply the lateral side of the forearm, and the motor branches is going to supply the brachioradialis, brachialis and coracobrachialis. And this is a lateral root of median nerve. And then in the posterior cord we have 5 branches that is named as ulnar, ulnar. That ulnar is going to denote the upper subscapular nerve, lower subscapular nerve, nerve to latissimus dorsi, axillary nerve and radial nerve. This upper subscapular nerve is going to supply the subscapularis muscle, and this lower subscapular nerve is going to supply the subscapular nerve along subscapularis muscle along with the teres major. And this nerve to latissimus dorsi, or also known as thoracodorsal nerve, is going to supply the latissimus dorsi muscle. And then we have axillary nerve that is going to supply the deltoid and teres minor. And this we have a radial nerve that is going to supply the triceps. So we have seen the 5 branches of posterior cord. And then coming to the medial cord, we have a medial pectoral nerve, and then medial cutaneous nerve of arm, medial cutaneous nerve of forearm, and the median nerve over here, and the ulnar nerve. Okay, fine.